Welcome back. Good morning. Today we are going to discuss about the social welfare function, which is a long overdue because we have discussed in between so many other things like Calder Higgs compensation, and we've discussed about the other aspects of Siddik paradox, voting theorem, etc. So these are all basically connected with the social welfare function, which we have discussed, or what is we earlier in the first semester we have done with the Samuelson's reveal preference and subsequently Bergson's criteria, etc. So we, of course, we are not actually unaware that this portion is being discussed, but the social welfare function is a very important framework in which we have to also place the general equilibrium and welfare analysis. Social welfare function links certain allocation of resources to the social utility, basically welfare derived by the society from it. So if we had one social welfare function, we would be able to compare two allocation and choose the best one from it. So how are we going to construct that social welfare function? Starting from the individual's preference is a big question, because that is actually what we are going to discuss. Basically, social choice mechanism in that sense is having or we need some mechanism to add up different preference to utility function. One way to aggregate preference to arrive at a social decision is to use the Pareto criteria, which we have seen the bits and the pitfall of Pareto criteria and the strength of the Pareto criteria. And we already discussed about this aspect again. We also discussed about the Calder-Higgs criteria, and we had looked into the Siddik paradox and their aspect. Let us head further to this issue of social welfare in that sense. Now, limitations of the welfare analysis so far is actually basically based on the constitutional approach, that is Arrow's theorem. Is the approach over ambitious? Is a question which we have to keep in mind, because we are going to recall all this thing eventually, and then you have a general welfare criteria which is called the efficiency, but normally people say that it's very nice but indecisive. I have also pointed that fact earlier, and then we have already discussed about other aspect of a contradictory nature of all these things, and we will see whether we are actually heading somewhere which is very important. So, social welfare function in that sense is a very simple one, but it is not that simple as we think, basically. So, restriction of the relevant aspect of social state to each person, that is a household, and knowledge of a preference of each person, that is a household, comparably of individual utility, which is called the utility levels and scales, an aggregation function which is called a W for utilities, and in contrast with the constitutional approach of what we had seen in the Arabian case or some other approach. So there we were trying to aggregate ordering, etc. So now if you have a social welfare function in your mind, then this is actually the kind of a graphical depiction one can basically give, that we defined the utility level not on ordering, impose several restrictions in that sense. So this is what is actually called your welfare function. So this is take the utility possibility set and social welfare contours a social welfare optimum. Now how do we achieve the optimum is actually what we are going to discuss by aggregating from the individuals or households case. So issue in social welfare analysis is the following, because in the very beginning itself I would say that there are issues. So what are the ethical basis of the social welfare function? What should be its characteristics? What is its relevant relation to utility, and what is its relation to income, etc. So these questions definitely is going to actually pop up eventually. Now let's look into the individualistic social welfare function. That standard form of expression thus is, as I pointed earlier, that is you have a W which is of a vector of different v1 or v2 v3 etc, and an ordinal function which is being applied and defined on space of individual utility level, not on profile of ordering. And but where does W come from is the question everyone used to ask. So we will check out two approaches, the equal ignorance assumption or the plum assumption. So we will see that what is a PLUM. People like that is utility more principle. Okay, or you have, sorry, you have an equal ignorance assumption case. So we will discuss each approach that is applied here. So equal ignorance assumption and the plum assumption, which will eventually discuss. So equal ignorance approach is the following: like suppose social welfare is based on individual preference and the preferences are expressed behind the veil of ignorance. This is basically a coup which we had taken from the Rawlsian understanding. So we explicitly don't speak about the Rawlsian case here. So, but the preferences are expressed behind the veil of ignorance, and it works like a choice amongst the lottery. So don't confuse this with the teacher, okay, of the lottery assumption case. So each individual has partial knowledge, that is knows the distribution of an allocation in the population, knows the utility implication of the allocation, knows the alternative of the great lottery of life, and does not know which lottery ticket he or she will receive. This is actually the kind of an equal ignorance case. So we know that actually this is pretty interesting because distribution allocation, we know that. So for example, if you have 1 million lottery bin, you know that what is actually, it is actually distributed among 1 million people. So if provided that one person takes each person takes a lottery in that sense. So utility implication of an allocation. Now again, in that context, if one person takes more lottery, means also that there are more number of people or chance of him or getting 1%, and each one person's probability being always added to that. So alternatively, in great lottery life is actually understandable to everyone. So I'm not going to the details of it. So suppose if you have this thing, then you have a payoff, and this is actually the kind. So let me discuss one by one in that sense. So once you have an equilibrium ignorance formalization, the individualistic welfare model, that is, you have a W, E1, V2, V3. Payoff I would get if I were assigned identity, that is 1, 2, 3 in the great lottery life, and use theory of choice and uncertainty to find the share of shape of social welfare function, where you have Vn minus m form of the utility function, which is nothing but the sigma w in ohm of pi w x w in that sense. So you have an equivalent of the following equation, that is your probability assignment to w, and u is current utility function independent of w, and uw utility payoff in state w, and replace your ohm by the set of the identity, that is 1, 2, 3 to n, where you will get a summation of all the h by h v of h. So welfare is expected to a utility from the lottery on identity, a suitable assumption about the probability, which is w is equal to an additive form. This is basically forms from additive logic, that is, you have an nh sigma n, a sigma h is equal to 1 of vh. So if that is the case, then you end up with a diagrammatic exposure. So you will get a question about an equal ignorance. Now in this case, construct a lottery on identity. The equal ignorance assumptions where people know their identity with certainty and intermediate case. The equal ignorance assumption says that if you have a pi x, which is equal to 1 by nh, but it is this appropriate, is the question which anyone can ask. Or should we assume that people know their identity with certainty, or is it true that somewhere between? So this is actually the question anyone can basically ask. So let me go to the details of it. That is 1 by nh. Case 2, the question about this particular identity. So the graph shows that this is the possibility of this case. And if you look into the plum case, people like us matter. That is now for the second rather cynical approach, is having the following mm, uh, power, that is either their own view or what they think society's view are, or what they think society's view ought to be, or probably based on the view of those in power. So this can be the possibilities, and there is a whole branch of modern microeconomics that is in reinvention of the classical political economy, okay, concerned with the interaction of political decision making and economic outcome. But beyond the scope of this course here lies that particular aspect of classical political economy. Therefore, we are not going to the details of all this analysis. But anyway, this is also very important. You know, whether who is going to make the decision and why they are doing a decision, etc., follows from this particular format. Like who is in power may impute because of the following proposition one can make, that is either their own view or what they think society's view are, or what they think society's view ought to be, or probably based on the view of those in power. So these are actually kind of a third party understanding of the thing which is a part of the political economy context. So we are not going to